Uh, yeah, thank you. Hi Jennifer, thanks for the talk last week. I didn't have a chance to ask questions, so now I have two language related questions. First one is you said that actually you worked in Germany for a few years, or quite a few years, and you also attend some German lectures, but during that time you didn't really have a chance to use that, right?
Yeah.
So my question is, the first question is, how do you, because you work in a English speaking environment, so how do you create a German speaking environment so that you have more chances to practice?
I think it was quite difficult actually, because a lot of people say, well, you live in Germany, so it must be easy to speak German because you're surrounded by Germans. But as you know, that's not the case. So I think for me, the big change was I started working in a team where their level of English was very bad, actually. And I think they were a bit afraid to speak English. And at that time, I could speak German. My German was okay, but not very good for business, I would say, not at this kind of level. But they were more afraid of speaking English than I was afraid of speaking German. And when I joined the team, they told me, okay, from now we don't speak any English at all. And they said, we don't care if you don't understand, we will just carry on in German, and at some point you will understand, and we will speak slowly. And I think that was how I managed to have this German environment, let's say. But it was only at work, because outside of work, I mean, at home, I speak English. Most of my friends here are not German, because I find that it's difficult to make friends with Germans, at least in Hamburg, because they already have their friends. They have their little circle of friends. And even if you do maybe meet somebody, you end up speaking English, because normally they speak better English than your German. So I think really you have to just force yourself. You have to be really super uncomfortable. I don't know if you have some German people, or if you know people at work, you just have to say from the start, right, okay, we don't speak English. And I think you'll have 6 months of being exhausted and fed up, but eventually you'll learn much more quickly. Yeah.
I see. So I guess your colleagues they were quite nice by doing this on you, right? Or they don't really speak.
At the time, I thought it wasn't nice, but now I look back, it was the best thing they could do. So I think, if I'm honest with myself, I think I didn't push myself enough to speak. So I would speak at the doctor, or, in the supermarket when I had to. And I think for me it was very easy in an international company to maybe be like, I was a little bit shy or afraid. So it was easy to be maybe a little bit lazy and just speak English. And I think if somebody forces you not to do that, that's when you really learn.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. And second question is you learn Korean, and also maybe some Japanese, I guess, or not, French. But anyway, so you are like multilingual person. You are, and I'm wondering, are there any like approaches that you find most suitable for yourself to learn so many different type of languages?
I think for me, the main thing I learned was to speak straight away. So I think a lot of people, when they're learning, they think, okay, I need to learn grammar first. I need to learn to read. So I need a lot of input, and then I'll wait to speak because I'm not good enough. And I think that was probably a mistake I made at first many years ago. I think you can speak from the start. No matter what you can say, even just a few words, you have to use it, because otherwise I think you reach a point where you can understand, you can do simple things, but you'll get like your level of understanding is here, and then your level of, let's say, output is here. And it becomes very difficult then to kind of catch up. So I think when I was learning Italian many years ago, I was very nervous and very frightened to talk to people. And so I learned very, very slowly because I didn't want to speak. And I could understand what people were saying, and I would reply in English because I said, okay, my Italian's not good enough. And instead now, you have to speak from the start. So that's my approach. And if you can find somebody in Germany, they do a lot of tandems, they call it, where you have a language partner that you meet with, and I think you can always find people to exchange with. And I think there are a lot of people in Germany, Germans, that want to learn Chinese. So I think it's also good because it kind of forces you, when you have an appointment with somebody, you meet them, and you kind of have to speak. So yeah, to me it's just really speaking all the time.
Thank you. Yeah. That was my two questions. Thank you for your reply.
Okay.
How is your German going? I heard you have a lesson soon.
Nicht gut.
It's hard. German's hard.
Okay. So Lucien has two questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I have two questions. The first one is, do you want to help people since 2020, or you have this thought for a long time? And you think what makes you have such compassion? And the second question is, I think you must be very smart because you can learn such much things, language, science, and art, literature. And I have the question that you think which one is more important, science or literature for you, or for the society, or for the world? Yeah, that's my question.
Good questions. I think I was always interested in helping people or wanting to work with people in that way. So I don't think it was something that was suddenly new for me in 2020. I think the pandemic pushed me to make this change. But I think I always had this feeling, let's say, that I wanted to do something more than what I was doing at my work in engineering. But I think sometimes you need something to push you towards something. So maybe you have this thought, but you think, well, like me, okay, I studied engineering, I should work for this big company. You have this conflict maybe in your mind of what maybe the kind of society thinks you should do because of your degree and what's expected of you. And I think especially in Europe, we have would say we don't really have this mentality about community. It's very much about individualism. So when you live in this kind of society, I think you're always pushed to strive for more for yourself, career. And so if you want to maybe do something different, volunteering or a kind of vocation where you help people, it's almost considered this radical thing. And it's difficult even to find people maybe to talk to about this, to get some ideas, to support you here, because it's not really a mindset a lot of people have, I think. I think the reason I kind of have this mindset, or I started to go in this direction, is really my parents. I said a little bit in the presentation, but I didn't mention like my father, for example. So my father retired when he was 50, so 20, 23, 24 years ago. And everybody said to him, what are you doing? Because, he also had a good career, and he worked for a very large company. And everybody said, well, you'll be bored because, your life in Europe is about work. So, but my dad instead is a person, he's never bored because he's interested in everything. And I think I get a bit of his personality about being curious about the world. But also, since he retired, he didn't really retire. He retired from his job, but I think a bit like Mike, he didn't retire from life. And he spent the last 20 years helping people, actually. So we had a lot of people in our family and connected to our family that were very ill, a lot of bad situations. And I saw him over the years just all the time helping people, because he really cares about other people. He's a very selfless person. Still now, so he works. He volunteers in a charity, and he does electrical testing. To do this, you need some kind of special certification in electrics. And he actually went to night college with a load of guys in their 20s, and my dad at the time in his 60s, to get this electrical certification. Because he wants to help people. He wanted to keep active. And I think when you have people like that kind of guiding you and your family, you really take something from that. So yeah, I hope that answers your first question somehow. The second question, I don't think I'm particularly smart, actually. I think I'm just curious. I think, like Luke was telling me, he's always reading, learning. He wants to share that knowledge, to discuss things. He was mentioning to me about critical thinking, and I think I just grew up like that, always like the same as my father, always wanting to learn things. If I didn't know something, I wanted to look it up. From a very young age, I always read a lot of books. So I really have to thank my parents for that. And I think when you grow up with this kind of curiosity, I think you can learn anything. I don't think there are people, maybe some people have a special talent for something, but I think everybody can learn a language. If you think, well, I'm not a scientific person, I think you can learn maths, you can learn physics. I think you just have to be interested, and maybe it takes you a bit longer depending on your background, but I think everybody can get there. Like, you just have to have this drive and be curious. So I think it's just, for me, it's always been a curiosity about different things. And regarding whether science or the arts are more important, I think they're equally as important. So I think the easy answer would be to say, yeah, science is more important for the world because it allows us to develop things. We develop, in medicine. But actually, I don't think that's fully true, because I think without the arts, we'd be totally lost. And I think even scientists, engineers, you really gain something from the arts. It's how we pass on knowledge. It's how we learn about different cultures. So I think, as I said, I studied engineering, but I spent years as a child reading. I was fascinated by literature, the arts. My parents took me to the theater and so on. And so to me, the two worlds have to coexist. And I think the pandemic is a very good example of that. You know, in Europe, we're still stuck at home. You can't meet people, you can't go outdoors. And in the end, you see more people than ever are watching theatre online. So the theatre broadcasts, they say that more people are going back to reading, actually, that had maybe stopped reading years ago. So I think actually the arts have been incredibly important in this period for people's mental health as well. Yeah. I hope it made sense.
Yeah, my major was English literature, and it was often considered a useless subject in the capitalist society. But in fact, I think I benefited a lot from studying liberal arts. So could you be more specific on what benefits you got from studying literature?
I think I would say it opens your mind to a lot of things. I think you can discover a lot about the characteristics of people, of countries by reading literature. So I think from a cultural perspective, it brings you so much because there are many countries you'll maybe never visit. You can't visit every country in the world and get to know the people, but you can learn a lot about also the history of a country by reading literature. I think in purely terms of academics, I think you see these days that a lot of people don't read. And somehow people have become quite passive, if that makes sense. So we have a lot of input, people watch a lot of TV, but everything is passive. And I think with literature, it's active. So your brain has to actively think about things. You have to have this kind of more critical mind when you read. You have to think about things, and I don't think you get that from just passively watching things. And so, yeah, I think that's what it's for me.
That is so important, Jennafer. I think what you have hit upon right there is so clear to me at this point in my life. That the reading above all else, and the writing, just the action of writing. But when you read, you're visualizing all the time. You're visualizing in your mind. If I watch TV, which I don't do except for the news occasionally, wow, you're right. It's very passive. Something else you said that I just want to build upon slightly is that I want to say that my experiences over the years, especially in the last decade or so in Taiwan, this difference between a collective society, if you wish, is how I perceive the Taiwanese culture primarily as relative to what I find here in the States. Everything here is money. Everything's measured by money. And I sometimes, I may have said it before, in my writing now, I have the habit of making my I's always lowercase, no matter where they might sit in a sentence, even at the beginning. And I sometimes will capitalize we. And I jokingly say that we need to change our grammar structure in English and change those two words around because, we capitalized I all the time. And all I hear here is I, Luke will say to me almost, or Kevin or my friends in Wei Chang or in Taiwan will start with we often. If I ask a question, how is this done? Well, we do, you know, if I ask it here, it's going to be I. Big difference. I didn't realize Europe was, I've not been to Europe, so I'm not sure about Europe, but it's interesting that you say that. It makes sense that Europe would be like the States in that regard.
It's very similar, yeah.
Okay, may I ask some question?
Of course.
Okay, nice to meet you. My name is Fred Lee. I used to be a military officer working in a national aerospace research and development division. And I work as an instrumentation engineer in a high-speed wind tunnel. So from that point of view, we share similar career.
Yeah.
And so I'm quite interested to know, in your presentation, you mentioned that you used to some kind of work regarding the flight test, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think wind tunnel is sort of a flight test, but
Right.
it is within a artificial environment. Instead of using the real aircraft, we use models to scale down models to simulate the flight conditions. So would you like to share with us more about your career when you did the job regarding the flight test?
Sure. Yeah. So, of course, you have several test aircraft, and there are many tests, as you know, that have to be performed before an aircraft gets certified. But even after the aircraft is certified and it goes into operation with the customers, they still perform many flight tests. Maybe they've installed a new system, so they've changed something with the aircraft. There are many modifications to aircrafts. So an aircraft typically has a life of about 20 years. And in that 20 years, there will be many changes and modifications made. So when I worked in flight test, we were not allowed to take part in the flight test. It used to be allowed many years ago. If you wanted, you could be on board the aircraft and you could test some parameters. But since it's obviously quite dangerous, so I say dangerous, it shouldn't be dangerous, but yeah, it's a test aircraft and sometimes things happen. And they stopped letting people on board for that reason, because there have been very rarely some accidents, because at the end of the day, you have an uncertified system. So I was working on the ground, but what we would do is so the aircraft would transmit data live when it was flying, and it used to fly in a huge circle basically over Europe. And I would take the test data from the various systems, and it depends what we were checking, but if there was a new system installed, you would check the flight parameters, if it was having an effect, if that system was working properly. We also had to work with a lot of the suppliers that would supply different parts for the landing gear, for example, and they wanted to test some new parts, and we had to arrange that with them to certify different configurations. So we did a lot of physical work on the aircraft, which was great because it was the only time I got to do that really in Airbus. Mostly I was sitting in an office, so people think it's very exciting doing aerospace engineering, but a lot of the time you're just sitting behind a computer, of course, like many jobs. And that job was really, you know, if you go underneath in the cockpit, if you go underneath the pilot's seat, you get in the nose of the aircraft, and under there you have the black box, you have all of the systems. I can maybe find some pictures and send them, because I shouldn't have done, but I took a lot of pictures at that time because it's fascinating. When you strip the aircraft away, it's when you see what's really in the aircraft, it's unbelievable. But I used to go underneath the seat and climb down, and we would have to pull all the circuit breakers. And as I said, they always sent me in because I'm quite small. So I worked with a lot of very big English guys, you know, so it was always me crawling around there, changing the configurations, and yeah, going inside the fuel tanks. A few times they let me drill some things on the wing, and I said, this is a really bad idea, because bye, Vincent. Yeah, said, guys, do you really want me to drill this aircraft? And they said, well, it's a test aircraft. Nice to see you, Vincent. Yeah, so
yeah,
it was a really fun time.
Yeah,
something
quite
practical.
similar to the flight test of military aircraft. Okay. Another question. From my view, both Luke and you share the same philosophy. You have similar personality. Both of you like to learn something new. You are selfless to help others to learn languages. I think, as I told Luke a couple of days ago, I wrote a comment about your determination to become a teacher. I said, in your blood, there lives your grandma's spirit. Your grandma used to be a teacher in Hong Kong, and now you retire, switch from your Airbus work to become a teacher, teaching others to learn languages. I think from that point of view, you and your grandma are quite similar, right?
I think so. Yeah, I was talking to my mum about this, because I never met my grandmother, unfortunately. She died of cancer many years ago. But me and my mum were discussing, you know, I think it's a difficult concept for a lot of people to think that maybe certain things, physical things, get passed down in genetics. So I think, of course, we accept that because there's a science behind it. But I think what people can't really consider is that, at least in Europe, for sure, in the West, the way we think about things, that we don't think really maybe some personality or something of your ancestors could be passed down in your genetics. And instead, I think maybe it's really the case, because I think it's interesting that I'm just realizing now how much I have in common with my grandmother. And as I said, I never met her, but you know, maybe of course she gave a lot of values to my mother, who passed them on to me. But I also wonder if, yeah, somehow it's like coming full circle. You know, she was born in Germany, here I am in Germany, and now I'm a German citizen. And then I found out, yeah, she became a teacher, and so I think there's something quite nice about that. Yeah.
Wish you have a successful and prosperous future.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Nice to meet you.
You are a German citizen, so you are allowed to have dual citizenship?
I did, yes, because of Brexit.
So that's because of your work?
Because I lived here so long, I think after 7 years you can get the citizenship, and there's certain criteria. You have to speak the language to a certain level and so on. But yeah, for me, it was quite mandatory because of the UK leaving the EU. It would have been okay for me if I carried on working for my company. But since I left my company, I would have no right to live in Germany or in Europe anymore. So was lucky I got citizenship.
I was wondering, after you left the Airbus, why do you still live in Hamburg? And then I say to myself, maybe it's because you have an apartment or a house with your boyfriend there, and so it's okay. But I think maybe eventually you will have to leave. I didn't know you are a citizen. So are you going to stay there for a long time to come?
I don't think so. To be honest, we're thinking at the moment about moving to Italy. So my boyfriend's parents are a bit older and they have some health problems. So his father had a transplant, and he's had a lot of problems in the pandemic because he really can't leave the house because corona for him would be deadly. And I think that also makes you think about things a certain way. And in Germany, you've got my parents in the UK, his parents in Italy. And I think it would be nice to be closer. My parents are still, thankfully very fit and healthy. They love to travel. So I think it would be a good thing to live in Italy near his parents. And then we're a bit closer to family, I think. As time goes on, it becomes more and more important. Yeah. It's something we really miss here.
Yeah, so speaking of traveling, in Taiwanese culture, saving money is very important. If you spend money traveling, people will say, what a waste of money and time. So, yeah, could you talk about the benefits of traveling in contrast to saving money in the bank? Because I try to educate people here that if you save a lot of money and you don't use it, eventually you just either your children will fight over your money or the government will put on a very heavy tax. And so what's the point of leaving a lot of money to your children? And they don't quite understand what I mean. Yeah.
I think I've come across the same way of thinking also here in Germany, actually. Germans really like to save money. I think partly it's something that came after the war, of course, because Germany was completely devastated. And I think here it's very often considered, the most important thing is to save for the future. But it's to the extreme that, I worked with a lot of people that, they earned good money. They could have done so much and still saved money, but they just couldn't somehow allow themselves to do it. And I used to have colleagues that said to me, the same, oh, you go traveling here and why do you waste your money like this? But for me, I find it incredible that, that people don't want to use the opportunity in their life to travel when they have it. Some people, unfortunately, don't. But I think when you have the opportunity, why would you not want to? Because in the end, for me, it's just really simple. I mean, you live once. You don't know how long you're going to live, and there's so much world to see, and you're never going to see all of it. But even if you can just see a little bit of something, I think it changes completely your perspective on life. I mean, I've got a lot of friends here from different countries. I think it's normal when you're an expat in a different country. And I think just having friends from different countries gives you a different perspective. So we know a lot of people here from South America, for example, completely different to Europe, different life, different mentality. And I think you can learn so much just from meeting people from different countries. And I think you have to keep this open mind in life. And how can you do that if you never meet people? But the best way to meet people, of course, is to travel. And you know, you can't really understand a country if you haven't been there. And I think just the experiences I've had traveling, the people I've met, they stay with you forever, you know. And I think this is the other point. I need to find it because I can't remember the quote, but I read something about this in a book once. I think it was from a psychiatrist, maybe, or somebody that worked with the elderly. And he said, you know, in the end, if you look at Alzheimer's patients, so Alzheimer's patients, of course, in the end, you lose everything almost. And he was thinking philosophically about this. So, you know, in the end, you get to the end of your life. If you have Alzheimer's, you don't even know who you are anymore. So what is the meaning of everything then? Because your possessions, they don't mean anything. Maybe you end up on your own in a care home. So everything you worked for, everything you saved for, all those things, your house, it doesn't mean anything anymore. So what does it mean? And basically, this guy said something that really struck me, because my grandfather had Alzheimer's, and I saw him have this decline where he lost nearly everything, all of his memories. He didn't know who we were anymore. But what they do with Alzheimer's patients is for them to remember which room they're staying in. They put something from their past, but from very long ago, something that still means something to them. And in my grandfather's case was a picture of a Spitfire aeroplane, because he worked on Spitfires in the war. And even after so many years, he knew which room was his because it had this Spitfire picture. And, you know, talking to him, he would have these lucid moments and he would think he was in France. Why? Because he used to go caravanning in France with my grandmother. And so the point I'm coming to is that in the end, what you're really left with, even when you have Alzheimer's, is your memories. And this is what your life is made up of, your experiences. Because, you know, with money, you can lose everything. And many people did in Europe, in US, in the economic crisis. You had many people, very rich, houses, cars, they lost everything. And in the end, what are you left with? You are left with your memories, your experiences. I think that's the foundation of your life. And so coming to the point, I think that's something with traveling. I have so many memories of those times that for me are priceless. So yeah, I could have put that money in the bank, could sit there. I could one day maybe give it to my children and so on and so forth. But I think for me, I will never regret a single penny I spent traveling, because there are just so many priceless memories, and I think that just stays with you. And as I mentioned, I started traveling with my mother, actually. After we went to Hong Kong, we did several trips together, just me and my mum. And I wondered, why did we never do this before? I mean, we've been on many trips together, but just me and her, it was something kind of special. And just those trips with my mum, I'll never forget them. And that again, for me to have had this time, even if we never do any more trips, to have had that time in my life and experience those things together with her is something really irreplaceable. So I think people need to change the way they think about money and what they think is the meaning of life. Because if you think the meaning of life is the possessions you have, the house you live in, if tomorrow you lose all of that, and it can happen to anybody, even if they don't think it, if that was the meaning of life for you, what do you have left? Nothing.
Yeah.
Luke, I'm reminded of something my grandparents used to say, or one of them, I think my grandfather. It was a quote, and I don't remember the quote, but it had to do with why is money round? And of course, they were talking about coins. Well, it's round because it's meant to roll. It's meant to be used, you know. And you should look, do a Google search on the value of travel versus other things. I can't remember the quote there either, but there's something I think out of the Far East that a quote that just illustrates that travel is probably the best thing one can do. I mean, you learn and you grow, and it's just so far superior to most other things. So, yeah, I didn't realize about Taiwan. I just learned something new about the disdain for travel. My friends love to travel. My Taiwanese friends almost all travel.
Well, Jennafer, may I ask where does your boyfriend live in Italy? Because I used to work in Italy for 2 months in northern Italy, called Vicenza. Do you know this place?
I've never been, but I know of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's quite near the very famous scenic spot, Venice. It's quite near Venice.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah,
What
I strongly recommend you and your boyfriend go to visit the Vicenza, which I believe it is a quite beautiful town, and for lovers such as you and your boyfriend. Yeah, yeah.
That's a good tip. And what were you doing in Vicenza?
Yeah, because after I retire from the military, I worked for pharmaceutical inspection machine company. We had a cooperation with an Italian company, so for certain kind of a technology transfer. So they told us how to manufacture the pharmaceutical inspection machine. So our team, consisting of 5 people, we flew from Taiwan to Vicenza, staying there for 2 months, learning how to manufacture the pharmaceutical inspection machine.
Oh, nice. It's a nice experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, my boyfriend's from Tuscany.
Tuscany, yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful place.
Oh, I got one question. Forgive me. Okay, you are native English people, right?
Yes.
And now you work in Germany, and now you got your German citizenship. You kind of become a German, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. In the World War II, Great Britain and German were enemies. So is there a conflict for you to overcome such kind of feeling? Because your ancestors and German used to be enemies. Now, do you have any problem to have such kind of question?
No, I don't think so. I mean, so I knew my grandmother when she was a child, when the Second World War broke out, and at that time you had to be in the like the Nazi youth, and you had no choice about this. So I could look at it from the perspective and say, okay, my grandmother was in this Nazi youth, but of course, many people had no choice. There was the indoctrination, but also, as a child, you had to go along with everything. So I think I don't have this feeling of a conflict. I mean, after the war, my grandmother had nothing. So her and her sisters were really starving, actually. And I think she had to kind of build herself up from nothing. And so I think in this way, having this history in my family meant that I didn't have any kind of bad feeling, let's say, towards Germans. I mean, I know at school, so some people knew that my mum was born in Germany, because we studied a bit of German in school. So I mentioned this, and people used to still then make some quite nasty jokes. Oh, your mum's a Nazi, and I think it's children, but children get this attitude from their parents, of course. So I wonder if there is still a bit of something there. But I think now, if you look at Germany these days, I mean, rightly or wrongly, Germany has somehow become the leader of Europe unofficially. It's a very powerful country in Europe, and I think a lot of people have even almost forgotten a lot of what happened in the history. And I think as well, we have to move on from that, because I think maybe something I see in Germany is that they maybe don't talk about it enough. I think, of course, there's a kind of shame there, especially with people my age that weren't even born at the time, but I think they have this feeling of shame about the history, and so it's something you really don't talk about here. And I think that's not quite right, because I think you should never forget your history, because otherwise history has a tendency to repeat itself. And sometimes I think there are really some things you should remember. So I don't think we should shame Germans or any other countries. And, the UK has done some really terrible things in its history, as we know. So that's another point, that the UK is hardly a faultless nation, because we had the British Empire, of course, which is still many terrible effects of this today. So I think the important thing is not to forget the history, but to move forward with this new perspective.
Thank you for your sharing.
Thanks for the question.
Yeah, I think it's very similar to the relationship between Taiwan and Japan. Taiwan was once occupied, ruled by Japan. Yet nowadays we seem to have very strong ties, but sometimes you have this inner conflict. They killed your ancestors, maybe your great-grandfathers, and they recruit young people to fight their wars. But like you said, it's not the current generation's fault. It's their ancestors' fault. But we have to move on and have a good relationship, and do not let the history become an obstacle, because it's not going to help anyone if you hold this grudge against someone or some countries. Yeah, I think Germany is doing a good job in acknowledging their own faults, and they have many monuments or many things to remember the past. Especially Angela Merkel tries to be honest with the past of the country. Yeah, so, but still people have the tendency to shame others, and and people are mean. Many people are like, because it's the easiest way to like make yourself look more important, or to like to ignore the fact that Germany has become a leader in Europe, and try to make themselves feel not so bad about the fact.
Exactly.
Okay, Michael, you have anything to add?
Oh, I was just all the talk about Germany, and I'm thinking of something that's happening in the United States today. Some of our more conservative people, the right side of the political spectrum, they're really upset right now about what they call cancel culture.
Oh, yeah.
And I find it very interesting, because what they're concerned about is that we're beginning to teach some of the realities about some of the terrible things that America has done, not just in the world, but to its own citizens, or the Native Americans by way of example, or the blacks, and still continue even to this day. So when we begin to publish for our schools and our history books some of this revised history that's a little more realistic, many of our conservative folks get really upset, because they don't want to hear this, you know. So it is very healthy, as you are saying, and as Jennafer is saying, that to acknowledge the past and not forget it, because I think it just simply promotes well-being. You become a better person. You forgive, but you don't forget, so to speak.
Okay, Lucian, you can ask one more question. Lucian, you
Okay,
okay, go ahead.
I want to hear Jennifer to say some Mandarin. She says, Jennifer.
Oh no! Oh no!
No. Jennafer wants to study Laozi.
Laozi.
Yeah, and I think Michael is interested in Tao.
Please do. Please do. I'm just thinking, behind me in my book cupboard here, I've got works by Lao Tzu. It's both Confucian. I like studying Confucius and Confucianism, and also Lao Tzu, and they've been very, very important to me. So I would recommend it highly. I think you'll love it.
You know, you should give yourself a challenge, Mike. Jennafer wants to study its original text. You always study English translations. That's never.
I'm a funny guy, Luke. If you were sitting here, you would see more traditional Chinese script characters than you would see English words all around me, all around my walls, everywhere, everything that's hanging. And yet, what I've picked up as far as being able to reproduce, other than some simple things like the mountain symbol, you know, and so on and so forth, very little sticks. But I never quit. As Jennafer says, I never quit. Your point's well taken, Luke. If you really want, I suspect that if you really want to get the gist, to really truly deeply understand, as close as one can understand what some other person has said or done, you have to understand the language. I think there's just, in translation, a lot is lost, I am sure.
Yeah.
I think there are so many English translations of this text, because it's really difficult to translate in English and still capture the essence of it. So
I just read something. I want to toss it out to all of you. Oh, are we still on?
Yes.
I read an interesting thesis. If you were to take a group of people, say you had a group of native English speakers in one group, and then you had a group of non-native speakers speaking English, and then you had a mixed group, which one would be more effective? Who would communicate more effectively? And the thesis is that non-native English speakers actually use English better and more effectively than native speakers. And you hear that and you say, what? Well, because of idioms. And native speakers will throw their English idioms out all the time. Well, if people are from the South in my country and they're from the East and from the West, the idioms are sometimes different. So they may understand and have more problems communicating than two non-native English speakers who have learned, if you wish, how to function directly in English without all of the idioms. Very interesting thesis. I've got to find it someplace. I'll share it with you, Luke, and if I can find where it's written, but very interesting thesis that sometimes fluent non-native English speakers will communicate more effectively than the actual native speakers. Something to think about. It sounds very strange, but.
All right, I think time's up. We really want to thank you, Jennafer, for talking about your experiences and share with us your passion for learning and traveling. And I think we are like-minded people, so we hope to work together in the future. And we will make an appointment with you, okay? If you are available.
definitely, of course.
Okay, you have a good day.
Thank you. It was great speaking
Okay.
to you. Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much.
Happy weekend to you all.